Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a one-off Halloween episode, a look at the 2019 film Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. For those counting at home, this is mainline episode 316. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, currently published by Comixology. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy.
Howdy.
We're both doing double howdies tonight.
Double howdies, yes. Well, in honor of the great state of Texas. And finally, in Denver, color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Okay.
That's my Woody.
Scary story. That was actually not Woody.
Yeah, I know.
It was the
It's
little
somebody
shark.
else.
It was the little shark that pops up wearing
Pretending
the
to be
Woody
Woody.
hat. And he
Yeah.
says, I'm Woody. Howdy, howdy, howdy. All right.
Yep.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a 2019 horror film directed by Andre Overdrahl, based on the children's book series of the same name by Alvin Schwartz. The screenplay was adapted by Dan Hageman and Kevin Hageman from a screen story by none other than Guillermo del Toro, as well as Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan. The film came out in 2019. It grossed a worldwide $105 million against a budget of about 30. So that's a hit. So there will be, presumably, a second one of these. This film came about because CBS Films had acquired the book rights to the anthology series. But as we'll talk about, the powers that be decided that the one thing they didn't want to do was an anthology movie. So it's rare that you have a film based on an anthology book series, and rarer still when, therefore, an anthology is the one thing they choose not to do. And here we are. Let's get our opening thoughts. We haven't heard from Julia first in a while, so let's go Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go. Opening thoughts, the 2019 theatrical film, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Okay, well, I've seen this now twice, and I actually did, unlike a lot of things I've watched where I go, did we see this? This one I actually remembered pretty well, so I guess it did make an impression on me. I think there's some really clever parts to it, but for the most part, it just kind of leaves me just kind of meh. You know, I don't think it's the best thing we've watched, but I also definitely don't think it's the worst. Some of the stories are pretty creepy. Some of them are a little sillier. Trying to think which one is my favorite. Probably, I mean, I guess just the idea of the book writing its own stories, of the ghost writing the stories through time, basically. That is probably my favorite concept of the film.
Thank you very much. Before I let you go, were you aware of the book series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? That have any
Not
connection
really.
with you at all? Okay, all right. Very good. Tony, opening thoughts, and I'm also curious about your familiarity with the source material.
So I had seen a lot of the illustrations from the source material, but somehow I had missed it, and I'm not sure why, because even recently going through some old paperbacks that my parents had sent me, I saw these like Scholastic generic. There's one called Haunted Planet, which I might have to put in my endorsements, which creeped me out as a kid. I knew the illustrations because there was a lot about how they were going to redo some stuff or whatever, but I wasn't as familiar with the book, and I kept meaning to go back and check on that, and I didn't. I also was sad because there was a lot of stuff going on when this movie came out, and I was unable to see it in the theater. And this is something I kept almost going to see it at the Draft House, and I didn't get to. So I am glad that we're reviewing this, because, you know, then I could see it and talk with all of you about it. I like the framing device. I think it's kind of clever. You know, people's mileage may vary on that, actually, from what I've seen. Some people thought it was neat, and other people wanted kind of a more, hey, I just want an anthology. But if you're going to decide to not have it be an anthology, working in an anthology because the ghost is making it that way, was
Yes.
was actually a pretty cool thing to do. I liked that. I like the framing device. I like the actors. I thought they were all, I thought it was really good. I mean, if you're gonna make a PG-13 movie that appeals to a youth demographic, this is who to get. It really worked. I enjoyed the movie actually. I kind of see where Julia's coming from. Like, it's maybe not perfect, but it did make me wish I had seen it in the theater, because I would like to have had that kind of in a small crowd thing. I mean, Grant, I say that though, but a lot of times I'll go to a midnight movie, or slightly later, or slightly before. So I see a lot of movies. When I could see movies, I would see a lot of movies where there were very few people in the theater.
Absolutely.
But horror movies are great to kind of get that crowd reaction, and I thought it was really cool. There's some great bits in it, especially, and it has a really cool creepy tone, and I dug on that.
Excellent. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I am fairly familiar with the books. I had some of them when I was a kid. I think if you were a younger kid in the 80s, that this was something like almost everybody I know in my general age group had at least one of these books.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think, as far as like it being a nostalgia brand, like they were probably going for like the younger millennials, and then the late Gen Xers, like, that sort of little mesh group right there. That's what this is a nostalgia brand for. This is my third time watching this movie, and I really like it. My only real issues with it are some stuff towards the end, where I think there's some kind of mixed message stuff that I'll go into when we actually get to talking about the end of the movie. But I think it's very, very well done. What's interesting about there's only a few other movies that I can think of as, this is, a horror, as Tony pointed out, it's a PG-13 horror film. It's supposedly aimed at younger people, but it doesn't really feel like a toned down horror film. Like it's everything's played, the stakes are played as, pretty high. The monsters are actually dangerous. One of the only other movies I can think of that really does this is Monster Squad. And I think it does a great job of that as well. Because kids ultimately, they don't like being talked down to anyway. If they want to watch a horror film, they want to feel like a real horror film, which this absolutely does. I think the creature effects are really cool. I think it's very atmospheric. It's got a great fall atmosphere. It deals with some heavier stuff with like the Vietnam stuff that I still think is resonant today. Also the fact, just watching it today and thinking about it, this is a Halloween movie, but it's also an election year movie. And the fact that we are in, it's Halloween time, and it's right before an election, that really resonated with me today watching it. But I don't know. I really like this movie. I think it's probably going to be one that I go back to every fall. I think it's a pretty well done piece of. Also, the director of Troll Hunter and Del Toro together. Like, how could that not be at least somewhat entertaining? But
Troll Hunter's great. So
yeah. I really dug this movie.
Wonderful. Okay. So the original Scary Stories Told in the Dark book came out originally in 1981. So it's definitely, it was definitely a part of my childhood. They weren't by any means my favorite collections, but I loved them. I definitely read these series. The stories were super short, so if you had kind of a short attention span, or you didn't want to plug into a whole novel, there were collections of just extremely short scary stories. And they had those really memorable paintings that everybody did get up in arms a couple of years ago when they may even have done a version that had different art, but everybody loved this version. So, and by this I mean, if you look up the book Scary Stories Told, the illustrator that appeared in the paperback version, I liked this. To me, the part of what's going on, and then we'll get into it. There are so many things I do like about this movie, but my complaints about it often, strangely, are in the same way that I liked the movie Dark Shadows, with about a full grade point deduction for being called Dark Shadows. That I thought that was like a very funny parody of something or other, who knows what, but it also was called Dark Shadows, and that was deeply disappointing because it was a missed opportunity to do it Dark Shadows. This is very cool for all the things that you mentioned, and yet it's not Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I really feel like it's an error not to do, because Guillermo del Toro makes his comment where he said, the reason we didn't do the anthology is because anytime you do an anthology, the movie's always only as bad as the worst anthology, as the worst story in your anthology. So you go to Tales from the Crypt, the movie Tales from the Crypt, and it's as bad as the worst one. And I was thinking, first of all, I don't know if I agree with that. But second, that's the game. You're in the game. If you're in the game, play the game. If you're doing an anthology, do the anthology. If one of your stories is not as good, I guess that's the way the cookie crumbles. But
it's weird to me to say that, but then that could be true. But isn't it, if you're doing an adaptation like this, you get to pick which stories?
Oh, yes.
It's not like you had a bunch written and you go, well, the budget is this and we couldn't do that, so let's...
You can have the best stories to work with, and it's still because I just watched the Books of Blood movie, and that was tepid. So you can have solid gold to work with and still not adapt it to the best of the ability.
I mean, true, but you're trusting these filmmakers, right?
Right. There's also, I should mention,
the Books of Blood, but we say, we gold, but there's some stories that work perhaps better than others. I like the whole thing, but you get to pick the super group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of all the Books
in the
of Blood.
original,
so
Scary Stories Tell in the Dark, the original book has, no kidding, 25 or 30 stories.
Right.
So if you were to do a traditional 4 to 5 story anthology with a frame, you'd have to pick just a tiny number. Look, I'm not saying that actually would work. We would now, a year later, actually only about 7 months later, we would be gathered together going, okay, do we want to discuss the Guillermo del Toro executive produced anthology movie called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark that came out last year? And, maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. Okay, so I said all of that. I sound like a jerk. What I liked about this was, obviously the era is just tapping a vein for me. I really dig the whole, hey, it's the late 1960s thing. I love everything from the buses to the soda, the paper soda cups, to everything about that. That is right up my alley, and I totally dig that stuff. I don't like the CGI. I'm really sick of CGI monsters running around houses. I wish I could close my eyes and wake up in some era 25 years from now.
These monsters weren't specifically CGI.
Okay.
They're
people.
The
faces. Yeah, the Troy James the contortionist. Yeah, Troy James the contortionist does the body work for Jangly Man, but the face is what's CGI.
Yeah,
he's actually doing
like the Scarecrow and the pale face woman and all that stuff.
Love that. I love the Scarecrow.
Those are people in suits with some CGI gloss over it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I dig those. I think I'm talking specifically about Mitai Doti Walker and that reminded me very much of the witch, the Jangly Man, yes, which reminds me so much of the witch in the house in It, which I often say that it is bullshit to say something takes you out of the movie. So I'm not going to use that phrase, but I was like, oh God, are we really doing this? I mean, because to me, it's every bit as cohesive with the rest of the movie as Kirk Allen turning into a Warner Brothers cartoon and flying away in the Superman serials. It is, to me, it's distracting to see this much CG. But let's get started. that was my opening thought. So, and I apologize. It sounds like I didn't like this movie, and I actually did enjoy it. And obviously, this is my second time watching it. But the CG, jeez, and maybe
I saw another new movie this weekend, and let me tell you, if you thought this was annoying,
yeah,
there's some other stuff out there and big budget with relatively big actors, and the CG in it was just like, why did you choose? You didn't have to, especially in
Right.
scenes like this. Actually, you kind of need that.
Mm.
You could do it practical, but it would be harder, and I get it. And I actually think that the CG wasn't too bad in this. I
actually think the Jangly Man looks pretty good for. And I'm no CG fan, but like he looks. He does what he's supposed to do.
I don't feel like he looks like a person.
And you chose.
Well, he's not a person, Jason. He's a monster.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Tony, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead, Tony.
But there's a new thing that came out. And again, I just hate when somebody the CG doesn't look very convincing, and it didn't even need to be like the scene didn't need CG. This you kind of needed. You need to fit through bars. You need to do all the stuff, and so that works, and it worked for me. But I really hate it when you don't have to shoot the scene when it's not done. It doesn't match. It doesn't match the lighting, etc. And I have to watch for this crap all the time. So
I'm sure.
I'm hypersensitive to it, but it's really galling when you go, why did you spend all the money when you didn't even need it to do that? And it didn't match. So it doesn't work. It doesn't look great, and it was unnecessary. And that's what galls me. I think Jangly Man looked great there. So I don't know. Yeah. Again,
think
I'm
of
not
like the
saying
creatures.
you're wrong. I'm just
No. It's worth. I think of the creatures in Pan's Labyrinth, and I presume most of those were CG. And
no,
I thought, so those were suits. I'm thinking about like Pan himself, for instance.
Pan himself was a man in a suit.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, look, I'm not. I'm just saying that I don't know what this Jangly Man is supposed to be, but he does not look like anything that belongs in this world. And not in an uncanny horror sort of way. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. That was my opening thought. So we'll just gloss on that again.
We're gonna come back around to talking about that, I'm sure.
Right.
I have no doubt, absolutely, because I think it's worth analyzing whether I'm just wrong, and I'm totally ready to accept that.
Well,
by the way,
I think
there's
this is partly an aesthetic thing, so it's not a right wrong.
It absolutely and that's an excellent point. Because the funny thing was, you look at a movie like Saturday the 14th, which is, by the way, a comedy with almost no laughs in it. Nevertheless, I've seen it a million times, and it's good like background something to play, and it will often use hand animation, like cell animation, just over the screen, and that never actually particularly bothered me when they're doing it. But so I recognize a certain unfairness that probably has a lot to do with age, truly. Okay, so it's as Drew pointed out, it is 1968. They're really, in a sense, it is an anthology. Like Tony said, it is an anthology, and it's a frame story. And in the end, we get to tell different stories. They just go pretty quick because this frame story is enormous. But it's a small town in 68, so-called Mill Valley. And there's your usual cast of characters. There's a couple of dweebuses, there's a geek girl, and there's this Mexican kid on the run. And
there's Mexican, did they?
Did we establish that he's Mexican?
I think he's just Hispanic.
We can't actually tell if he's Mexican. He's accused of being an undocumented worker, but actually, spoiler, we're going to find out later, he's just simply on the run.
Well, he's on the run
because he's a draft dodger.
Yeah, he's a draft dodger. Yeah. Which is so very, very topical. But how did you guys like? So I just want to talk a little bit about the milieu of this movie, which I think is extremely wonderful to look at. I mean, did you feel like you were in Spielberg land with all the leaves and the buses and all of this?
Certainly the bicycling through the colorful trees at the beginning. The kids. That's very Spielberg.
I like to.
I guess, but maybe not Spielberg, because when I picture that, it's firmly 80s or at least late 70s.
I just think it's
Stephen King is really, perhaps.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. Yeah.
You're more likely to get King in the late 60s. Like, you're more likely to have a King thing that's in the late 60s to early 70s
That's
in the
true.
way that that's just, hey, I'm going to tell the story. It's going to be in Maine. It's also going to be 68 is not outside the realm by any stretch, right? We've seen a lot of that.
No, yeah.
So I think that was more likely for me. I dug it. It's still, to be honest, with the production and the way the way it's put together, it doesn't always seem 60s, I guess. There's stuff there. And this isn't a knock. This isn't a like, oh, I didn't believe it was the 60s. But
Right.
in the way that they've cast it and the way it's told, it feels 60s by way of 90s or 2000s in my head. And again, that's not a knock, but it didn't, I don't know. It doesn't have to hit you over the head. I don't think it had to do that. But I quickly, other than the mentions like, hey, the Vietnam stuff and a little bit of the costuming, I quickly, and I think it works. I think it's better off that way, and that it doesn't have to be that, even though I think it's really interesting choice to make it this instead of the 80s, considering the books came out in
Considering
81.
the book came out in the 80s. Yeah.
Like, again, I haven't read the book, so there could have been a story set in the 60s, and that's why they chose it. It could just be a choice, I mean, it's an interesting one. But
there's no reason for this choice at all. It's just, hey, what would be a good? It's truly what would be an interesting.
But it does feel
I think
timeless as well, and that was interesting too. Once they kind of dispatch with, it doesn't have to be that, and I think that's actually like not a bad choice actually as well. Drew, you were saying?
What I find very interesting about the setting is this is sort of like the classic American fall, but it's atmospheric in that way. And even though it's Pennsylvania, it's also Anytown, USA. And this is a producer and a director who are not from America, kind of interpreting Halloween time in this sort of iconic way with like the cornfields and the scarecrows and the people in their costumes. And so I kind of wonder if they chose like the like that sort of late 60s, because it's sort of the American graffiti time period, because they have this sort of iconic idea of America. And
as you point out, it's a time of great upheaval. So you can have your small town that looks like a small town that hasn't changed remarkably since the 40s, and yet at the same time you're shipping people off to Vietnam. Nixon is about to win the presidency, and and there's all of this. You're just at the height of the upheaval of the 1960s.
And again, it's weird to me now that you say that, because there is all the Nixon stuff. It's not. It's strange now that I play it back in my head and I'm really thinking about my reaction to the movie. When those things aren't happening, it felt like a 2000s movie. I don't know.
Like,
it's strange. It's strange. And again, like I said, it's not bad, but the time for me never stuck with me when they weren't telling you about the time.
Yeah, that's true.
And that
the kids
is
are
fascinating
not
to me,
right,
just because of how I interpreted it as a viewer.
But I think that's a good thing. I don't know if you mean it to be a good thing or not, because it makes you be able to put yourself into it as if you were one of the kids. Because if you're if you're watching it and you're their age or somewhere in that vicinity, and it's now, you don't go, well, I don't relate to this because it's 260s or whatever.
Right. It doesn't, it doesn't. Yeah. I think that timelessness, when it's not, when it needs to be, it works in its favor, It's not. It doesn't feel like it doesn't necessarily feel like Vast of Night, which is a very
that's exactly
has a very tight.
Yes.
Although the two girls in this movie in Vast of Night could be friends. I mean, they're the time period apart,
But the way that girl in Vast of Night was presented, her clothes were more period. Her glasses were more correct. This girl is wearing oversized sweaters that she lets dangle down over her knuckles, and all this stuff that's like very much a 21st century fashion, like sort of geek girl sensibility that is not in keeping with the actual.
And I think
1960s.
that's a good, whether it was intentional, and I tend to think that you make they were just smart about their choices.
Mhm.
I
I mean, where's the paisley,
I'm
man?
agreeing with Julia
Even
in the fact that
yeah,
I mean, the framing device comes about when it starts with I guess it's more, again, when you're talking about Spielberg, this is more Spielberg than King, if we're going to go with those terms. A Halloween revenge plot, because now's the time. This is the year to stick it to the bullies, right?
Mhm.
So an elaborate plan is hatched. They stick it to the bullies. We get chased to a house that is
Obviously
notorious. Yeah, is notorious for child murders in this town. And the framing device is, hey, when kids heard these stories coming through the wall, there was a girl who was locked up. Her family disowned her and locked her up, and anybody who heard the stories dies. So that in itself is scary and sets a pretty good groundwork. They end up finding a book, of course, and that becomes the Scary Stories book that begins to write their fate. And from there, it's almost, other than we ratchet up because it becomes more personal. And I think if you're gonna not do a straight anthology, that it was a really good choice. Like I said, I heard people kind of complaining a little bit about that, but I think they did a really good job of creating a cool backstory and running with that. But you could still take that out, and with just a different kind of Creep Show or Creep Show 2 tie together, you could do something really similar and it would still more or less work.
Right, because you can imagine a scenario where she goes, hey, I found a book, let's look at it, and it definitely sounds not as personal, where suddenly they're like, oh, let's hear the first one while we try to figure out how to get out of this basement. And
Right.
so screen goes black, you see a new cast list, blah blah blah, and then you get back and they're still trying to get out. You can see how that would go, and that sounds like every Amicus anthology.
Right. But I think this was really clever because one of the bullies, he's first. There's a scarecrow he keeps seeing, and that becomes the Herald story. But tying it back into a kind of contemporary horror setting that since Scream, we've had a bunch of movies that take let's deconstruct horror and kind of put it back together. And so there's a little bit of that in this, in the way that they're telling, oh, hey, it's writing itself. What do we do? Because we know it's going to affect us. And that whole framing device is really kind of cool. But it starts at a good place because it starts with a bully and you're kind of okay that he's in a horror movie, right?
He gets it. Yeah. EC style, the bad kid gets it first.
That is the most unusual looking kid to me. Like,
and the most unusual way to get gotten.
Yeah.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
To get beaten.
But although this sequence is an excellent example of why I'm saying that this doesn't feel like, when you think about like a kiddie horror film or a kiddie Halloween movie, like I think a lot of people think of like Hocus Pocus or something. Sure. This is very atmospheric. It's actually kind of scary. And when you see that kid get skewered with the pitchfork, like it really goes through him in a way that does not feel PG-13.
No, it feels
they really don't pull the punches in most. It's not Evil Dead or like Evil Dead remake, right? Like it's vastly not that. But as far as you're gonna make this more wide appeal movie, I mean it still has all the spooky horror stuff that you like if you liked reading horror books, if you like reading horror short stories. It has all of that and doesn't soften the blow at all, because there's creepy stuff. Like, I was just looking at, earlier today, looking at that Haunted Planet book I mentioned. And everybody on Goodreads goes, this is creepy. Kids read this? And I know those stories just freak me out because of their sense of dread and kind of this inevitable doom, which was terrifying as a kid. Still, like, I don't really reread it because it's such a downer, but they were good horror stories. And I think this plays into that when he's turning into the Scarecrow, it's horrific as well.
Well, let's talk about the
Yeah,
Scarecrow.
there's like that body horror element because he's,
Mhm.
Yes.
he's not only starting to look like a scarecrow, but he's like vomiting up hay.
Yeah.
Yes. And
It's
it's
an
really
amazing
dry
effect.
and horrible. Yeah.
It's an amazing effect. Now, I have to say, so yes, as far as the stories go, this one is fantastic. The idea, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is that he is a bully. He messes with other kids, and he likes to just baseball bat this scarecrow named Harold, which looks like more like a Leatherface than a scarecrow. And suddenly one night when he's doing some errand involving eggs, he's walking through the cornfield and Harold starts stalking him, and it's very much who do we say was Jason? Is it Jason or Michael Myers that does the teleporting? Is
Jason can teleport pretty well.
So he's doing the thing where when you see him actually finally walking, he walks very slowly, but then suddenly he appears in other spots in the cornfield. So that's terrifying. And then he runs the kid through with a pitchfork, and then the kid becomes the Scarecrow. I don't know what happens to Harold. I'm curious if he's like now free to roam the countryside. But anyway,
Harold got on a bus and he's hanging out in Florida.
He runs a Dairy Queen.
Yeah. But anyway, so the poor kid, once he gets run through with the pitchfork, just starts hay just starts coming out of his mouth, his ears, everything, and so then he becomes this Scarecrow, but he's wearing the same clothes, but he's got bugs like running in and out of his ears and whatever. It's such a great effect and so terrifying. It's just so I think it's a great story.
It's a good looking Scarecrow design, by the way. Because when the kid turns into the Scarecrow, he turns into a more or less identical Scarecrow, just with the letter jacket that the bully wore. But other than that, he's the Scarecrow who has a burlap back of a head and an open middle, because they've kind of lackadaisically could have stitched the Scarecrow together, pants and shirt, blah, blah. And a face that I cannot in-world explain at all, unless it is a latex Halloween mask that somebody has placed on this Scarecrow. That I can't understand, like, how in the hell you would, because a typical Scarecrow would be a burlap sack with maybe you'd sew some button eyes if you were getting really, because the birds don't care, so it's but it doesn't matter. It looks great. It's
got all the bugs crawling in and out of all the orifices. So it's scary. I mean, I can't blame him, despite the fact he's a bully. I can't blame him for really hating that thing. Yeah, it's nightmarish.
Yeah, really. What were his parents? I'm presuming his parents put it out there.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
It's a Scarecrow, and
well, you gotta wonder if Harold was a person.
Scare everyone. Never mind the crows.
Yeah, maybe Harold was a person who got turned into a Scarecrow, and the question is, do the parents know about this? Like, if they didn't put him out there, then what do they think about the fact they suddenly appeared one day?
Yeah. It reminds me, by the way, of the look of, Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, which is a freaking scary movie.
Oh man, I kind of wish we were doing that one as at least a hangout.
I know.
I want to revisit that because I think it's on Tubi
with Larry Drake. There's a lot of places you can see that one, and man, is it good. Yes.
TV's Larry Drake, also star of Darkman.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So
we should cover that at some.
Dark
Knight of the Scarecrow I haven't seen in years, but I remember it being really effective.
Dark Knight of the Scarecrow is it's always a timely horror. So yes, the next story after that. So basically, the moment they open this book, the spirit that is in the house begins writing new stories, each of which is foretelling how the different young person is going to die.
And before you get into the next story, I do want to mention that the way that the kids get Tommy back before he becomes a Scarecrow is awesome. Because Tommy every year will steal their Halloween candy, drive by and steal their Halloween candy. So this time, they're ready for that, and they have a bag of poop for him to steal. And then they try, they egg the car, and then they shoot flaming poop, which I think is super dangerous, into the car.
Yes, it is.
All these crazy things that they do.
Into his lap, no
that's
less.
Pretty brilliant. Into his lap, and it sets on fire. Yes.
I think they didn't
very
think
dangerous.
that through. I think that turned out to be.
Yeah, that was especially once he realized his sister was in the car, he was like, "Oh shit!" But anyway, I just wanted to not forget to mention that was hilarious. But yes, okay. So next story. story.
Okay, so and bear in mind that what's going on is that the ghost, which is Sarah, she was a girl who we're going to find out later. She was creative. She would, in theory, tell stories. She was accused of poisoning children, and now as a ghost, she's actually doing that. She's creating stories that creatively bring about the end of young people. And so the everybody who went down into the basement of this house, and actually everybody who was at the house at all, is cursed now. They've got this curse, and the stories are following them around. And Stella, our main character, is able to read the stories being filled in as they are fulfilled against each of the young people.
One thing I also liked, that's just it's kind of a random set piece, but the book that she's written these stories in blood no less, is, if you look at it, it makes sense that she's locked in here by these like business owners. It's a ledger, like it has ledger lines.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not just a blank book that was handed to her. It's a ledger that she's gotten and are taken. And I just thought that was a really interesting.
It is an interesting detail.
It's one of those things that somebody on the set, on the production team does, and you're like, oh, that's actually that works really well, because it's going to have a lot of space. It's probably something she could have either gotten or taken, and I thought that just was a really interesting touch. It wasn't just a blank book that you got, I don't know, for Christmas or something like that.
Yeah,
I thought that was really, really cool.
It is beautiful, and that is a very interesting choice. The next one, though, so we feel like as an audience member, we feel like we're in a safe zone because the bully's the one who got it, and in the anthologies, that's usually the way it works. But now that doesn't happen at all. After that, it is more like a stalker that is coming after each of these people, whether they're good or evil. And basically, everybody after this is really they're on the side of good guys. So our two heroes are targeted next because Augie.
Well, it reminds me a bit of like sort of a Halloween tinged Final Destination.
Yes,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It follows that kind of logic, is that like this curse is visited upon you and it's going to slowly pick all these people off.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Everybody who was there, everybody who is in sight of this thing is going to pick them off one by one, unless they can figure out how to pull the plug on it, basically. And that's what the story's going to be about. So in a sense, it's just a Mad Stalker story where it's gonna get them.
But what's interesting too, in that kind of flavor, and again, that's why I keep coming back to those parts. Feel like have a more modern flavor because we've seen those movies. But remember, when they get locked in by the bullies, and it's the ghost that actually sets them free, unlocks the secret room, so that all of this can happen. So the ghost has a vested interest in spreading this curse.
Yeah.
So I think that is also a really interesting choice, because it's not just they took it and they ran. All these things happen. You think it's going to be kind of localized to this house, and that's the kind of story. But no, the ghost goes, unlocks the door, and they don't know that, but it's basically allowing itself to pass out. It sees the opportunity to visit horrific things onto these kids and, possibly onto the town. We don't even know if things had happened differently, if some other kid would have picked it up and then the whole town gets ghosted.
Yeah, because they can't get rid of the book. Like, she tries to leave the book at the house. They try to burn the book. The book will always reappear. So yeah, I think you're right.
I really imagined, by the way, I know we got to go through the other, but I really imagined that one scenario that could have happened was if, let's say that she had decided these stories in the book were, I don't know, super toxic in a spiritual way, but she could dissipate it if she published it. And so basically she would become Alvin Schwartz and publish this book, and then it would be out there in the world and the ghosts wouldn't be killing people anymore. And then what you would have is the origin story of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Especially if you had introduced one of these teenagers as a painter, and so then they could have created the story the book that we came to know. But no, they didn't do that. And
the other scenario though is that it becomes Mouth of Madness. So
yes,
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You put it out in the world and it drives everybody crazy. Yeah. But that's what they did in New Nightmare, right? The whole idea was that making famous movies with Freddy was what kept him in check.
Right.
But when the movies got stupid, Freddy got bored and wanted to come into the world and wreak havoc again. Which meant movies are like sacrifice, which is fascinating. Movies are sacrifices we make to appease the god. Okay, Big Toe. The next one's Big Toe, and
This one I thought was dumb.
I don't know. I suppose it's.
But this was always the story I remembered the most from when I was a kid. So I was happy that they put it in, even though like it doesn't make a lot of sense in this, even in the story, because the way the actual story begins, somebody finds like a big toe out on the ground and they decide to like make a stew out of it because like,
yes,
who would do that? Like
right,
you find a human toe and you're gonna throw it in your stew.
No, it's a folklore thing. It makes no sense at all. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, it is very folkloric. I will give you that. But here, it's just randomly in the pot.
Right, exactly. And it's a curse. There's basically she's written a story of the toe. The toe's in the stew, and the creature is going to hunt Augie down, and it's scary. It's really scary because the creature drags Augie basically into under the bed and into the wall. This, if you were a young person, if you were a 7-year-old, this would be terrifying. I mean, this is.
I would say I'm very bummed out that he doesn't get found at the end, like that he doesn't somehow emerge.
No, right, you are. I mean, we think
although
they're the
they
good
leave
guys.
it open for the possibility of a sequel.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot that. You're right. Stella says, "You know what? I'm gonna crack it. I'm gonna get these guys out of the."
See, personally, as somebody who doesn't care if a movie has a happy ending or not, but personally, even though it seems like this movie is going to get a sequel, I wish they had not given a stinger for a sequel that you don't know is coming. Like, and I know that we're skipping ahead, but like. Yeah. I like to think that the people who died are just dead.
Yeah,
like I don't like kind of giving, and I understand that this movie is for a younger audience, and maybe that's why they felt the need to do that. But to me, one of the things that I respect about this movie overall is it doesn't really pull its punches, and that to me, even though it was there to tease a sequel, it just kind of softens a little bit everything that comes before.
But since we're in the realm of fantasy here, I really just don't have a problem with that. I mean, I don't mind the sad ending when it really feels like you've brought the story to a satisfactory close. Like, to me, when I don't care what happens in any comic book, after the final scene of Angel the series, in my mind, all those guys are dead. Nobody makes it out, and that's okay. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid don't make it out. Angel's team doesn't make it out, and that's just the way it is. But that's the conclusion of their story. Here, these kids just got axed along the way. I'm fine if Stella is going to mount a rescue.
The intriguing thing, if they do a sequel, and what I kind of hope will happen, is the idea of actually, instead of bringing the book into the real world, which we've seen in other movies other than this one, instead, like them going into the book.
Yeah,
I love the more intriguing notion.
I love the idea that they left us with some hope that you can like access.
Hopes for chumps.
I'm a chump. I like the idea that you can access the Upside Down and suddenly find Barb or whatever. Of course, in this case,
although they don't.
Barb was dead.
I mean,
but they do find the other kid. And so there's stuff like that where you can have some hope that maybe you'll find the person, or at least you'll know what happened to them. So I do hope that they find these two kids. Because they do kind of just disappear. You don't have
I'm sure if they can get all the actors back, there is going to be some sort of continuation of.
Oh no, there is planned to be. I'm sure that COVID has knocked him for a loop, but yes, there's because this movie made 3 times its budget. That's a thumbs up.
I just feel like that most of the movie has a pretty adult tone, and the ending, and we're jumping way ahead. The ending does not for me. Like the ending to me seems like a tone from a different movie.
Yeah, no, okay. So really quickly, the red spot goes exactly the way it goes.
Hate that one.
in
That's my least favorite.
the folklore stories. This is one where the sister of the young
Chuck.
man, the sister of Chuck, which is to say Ruth. Ruth has Ruth has a spider bite, and it's full of spider egg. This is just a classic gross out
Creature
you know,
thing. Yeah.
urban folklore story that that works perfectly and is it's so gross when it's the little spider.
No, yeah,
egg.
I walked out. I was like, okay, I'm not watching. I watched it once.
Jamie also doesn't like it, and she's usually pretty tough when it comes to gross things in movies, but that spider boil really freaks her the fuck out.
No, it's terrible. But it's interesting because they take what's kind of a standard gross out, oh no, look, spiders. I mean, it's gross when it happens, but they use that as, oh wait, the spot is this. Oh wait, no, it's your sister. Let's go find her. And
Yes.
there's a thriller aspect to it of how do we get in? How do we find her? It also leads to discovery, like, oh, the ghost was also there, which pushes the plot forward.
That's
so
right.
Again, the framing device, I really do like that they chose to keep pushing the story as it goes along by using kind of, again, the standard gross out kind of story to push to ramp up that kind of action in it.
Well, and I love the interplay between so at first the stories just exist. They're already in the book. Then the story starts writing itself in blood. And then when they have the big toe one, you almost wonder if they didn't call him and warn him if it would have happened the same way, because he doesn't actually hear the creepy voice the first couple of times. He only hears her saying, "Where's my toe?" or whatever it is. Who took my toe? And then so then you kind of wonder if, wait, are they now creating, like, are they now interacting? Especially since it's they're the ones in the book. It's like if they didn't do what they're doing, would it still go that way? But the spider one, that one just bugged me. I was well, no, I didn't mean, excuse the pun, but that one just was not my jam at all. And then, but like you say, it's moving forward. But I love the whole, I love the handwriting in the book. Like I love the fact that when they rub it smears because it's fresh blood.
Yes.
That's all very interesting. But yeah, we can move past the spider story.
I just want to mention,
survives, which is good.
We don't have to talk about the spiders anymore, but I do find it fascinating that the stories, in a sense, are only barely stories. There's really only one story, and there's a bunch of like little kind of glancing vignettes, really no different from in a slasher movie. Or
have you seen? I don't know. Like, and I only watch this because I sometimes have insomnia and I'll end up watching things on Netflix. But the Goosebumps movie did something very similar to this, where it's the idea of a book of scary stories invading the real world, but it has none of the artfulness of this. Like this movie has a lot of thought.
I did not watch the
I can't imagine, like, why would you? But like I said, when it gets to be 3 a.m. and you can't sleep, you'll be surprised what you watch. But it's very much that this is like a more cerebral version of that. And I think the Goosebumps movie came out first, and I kind of wonder, is from a studio perspective, if they were like, well, that came out and that did well, so we at least wanted to have a little bit of an element of that. Other than that, the two movies could be they're like night and day from each other, because the other one, really, the Goosebumps movie really is a kiddie Halloween movie. Like it really talks down and I don't actually think kids like that. Like, I really don't.
No, I agree. I do. I totally agree. I'm guessing, but I would agree with you. When I was a kid,
I just remember when I was a kid, when I was watching horror movies, I wanted to feel like I was allowed to be scared, and this again, this just feels, for the most part, just feels like a regular horror film. It doesn't feel like a kids movie. And
Yeah, no, I
even
agree
though
with
that
you.
like they have teenagers as characters, but it's got a great tone to it.
Well, if you're going to have a story about, since I'm an adult, this is my preference. I'm happy to watch a movie that stars young people. I just want the movie to have a tone that is mature. That's and so for me to enjoy it, which is not the same thing as if your target audience is somebody else. But so I agree with you completely. And by the way, the next section, which is the Pale Lady, where as they follow the plot around, they're doing some research. They go to the hospital to try to find out what's the deal.
They go look at
this
microfish,
ghost.
which
Right, they go look at microfish,
when I first saw this movie, I remember actually tagging you in on Facebook saying, Jason, you have to see this movie. There's microfish.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes, that to me, I loved the whole business where they take over an entire little reading room at the library, and they're looking at microfish, and they got a bunch of books out, and that was all great. I
We
loved
actually
all of
looked
that.
at microfiche, Jason and I, a couple of years ago to find old like
Movie
what was
listings.
it? Movie listings. Yeah, that was really fun. It was kind of a trip.
Yeah. No, it's still to this day at the Denver Library. If you want to look at movie listings from the '60s or whatever, you got to crack out the microfiche, and it's pretty great. But this, what they learn at the library sends them to, we need to get hospital records for this ghost girl Sarah, and so they wind up at the hospital. All of these, before we talk about the Pale Lady, which is really terrifying. All of these sets, by the way, are awesome. I don't know if we're looking at, I don't know if this hospital corridor that glows red or whatever, I don't know if this is a soundstage. I don't know if it's some Ontario hospital, but it looks awesome. The high school, all of the sets that they're in look fabulous. I mean, I really enjoyed the texture of the world that these guys are running around. But the monster that Chuck meets in the so-called Red Room, which is basically a white corridor that suddenly turns red when they set off the alarms.
No, that's incorrect. So
No?
that's not right. What happens is they're told that the records are stored in the Red Room, REDR.E.D. So
Yes.
they're thinking that's where they're going to go. He's like, I'm not going there because I keep having this nightmare where
Yeah.
I'm in this red room. But that's not where he is not the Red Room. He's just in a hallway. He's actually
But
trying
to
to avoid
me,
the Red Room.
that is the Red Room.
And then,
In other
it
words,
becomes the Red Room from the dream. Exactly. So
Yeah.
because it turns red. But yes, but the Red Room is not that.
Right, the Red Room
He's
is a sort of a joke. It's
Yes.
an acronym that for
right.
whatever
Okay.
records. And,
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. So,
but yeah,
that's right.
he gets swallowed up and asphyxiated by.
But you got to build up to it because that whole thing is fantastic.
Please explain it to us, Julia.
Well, the whole sequence.
Explain to us the weird weeble wobble that comes wandering
but I'm
down
not
the
even.
hall.
I don't even want to get there just yet. The whole
Okay.
sequence from them entering into the hospital and saying we need to look at some records from a patient, and the lady's just like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So then they're like, well, that's 100 years old. The person died 100 years ago, so surely it'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, well, fill out this form and we'll get back to you in a few weeks. So then they sneak in because they have the world's worst security guard at that place.
Mhm.
They manage to sneak in. They go to the real Red Room, and they are going to find audio of a session with Sarah, which is just as creepy as can be because she's being tortured by her brother. She's been tortured by her whole family the whole time because she's an albino and they've stored her away in the basement.
Jesus
She's different.
Christ.
So she's.
I don't know who if it was the same actress who was doing the physical Sarah, but the things this actress does with her voice,
it's
where
crazy.
she
It's
suddenly, the way she shifts from being, the victim to just being like pure evil is.
Yeah, so she's being tortured by the brother with electroshock, and he's trying to get her to admit that she's poisoned to the kids as opposed to what she's saying, which is that he has poisoned the town with the mercury in the water. And so he's trying to get her to change her tune, but suddenly she shifts from talking to her brother to talking about the kid Chuck and how he's had this dream. And then, yeah, you're right. Her voice gets super chilling and creepy. and they realize that Chuck is in danger. Meanwhile, so they're in the red room. Meanwhile, Chuck is in the hallway and is suddenly, well, he's running away from some guys that saw him, some security people. And so then when they turn on the alarm because they've spotted him, the hallway turns red. Everywhere he goes, it starts to become where he sees the same, blob creature with the hand-drawn face, basically a giant smile, and he can't. No matter which hall he goes down, she's at the end of that hall and getting closer and closer until finally there's 4 of her, or however many directions there are, but I guess 4, so that he can't go anywhere. He's just trapped. It is terrifying.
It's like
scary.
something from a nightmare.
It is, literally.
It's
yeah.
like really scary stuff, and that's why this movie like impresses me so much. Like they managed to make it pretty damn chilling.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is the parts that are scary are terrifying, and then there's some dumb things that I don't care for. That's why it's meh. But this was that's a good story. The Scarecrow Story is a good story.
One thing I thought it was interesting too, because throughout it, this is the person who has like the secret lingerie pin, where you turn it over and it's titillating, is they didn't go with kind of the usual horror, or he's seduced by a creature that's looks
Starts
good
out
or
sexy,
looks
but then
pleasing and then
demonic.
turns into this thing. They go straight with, this thing's terrifying,
yeah,
and it's after him. And I thought that was I'm sure it's closer to the story, but in a lot of other movies they would try this kind of, oh look, it's titillating, oh now it's horrifying,
and then it consumes him.
They just go straight with, oh, this thing's terrible, and it's really effective. It's a fantastic effect.
Yeah, she just consumes him into her body, which is just so.
Ugh. Yeah. No, it is. It's very scary. It really is. I actually don't know this particular story, so it must be from one of not from the original. So I can look into that, but. Boy, it is, and it's awful. So you don't want him to get sucked into, but remember also, just like Augie, the sum effect of it, since we don't see a body, is that he is essentially erased into another universe. So in a sense, we can get him back. All right, next comes the one that I had the most trouble with, which is the character, the story in the original was called Mitai Doti Walker, and it's just it's a very silly,
that's what it's called.
Sort of rhythm story that you would tell it around the campfire. It has no real punchline other than you're supposed to scream. And here it is seen as a character who is a sort of wraith of multiple body parts that puts himself together, and like a sort of a psychic attack dog is just coming after somebody in particular. And in this case, he's coming after...
It's Ramones, because this is where they really get into the whole thing of him being a draft dodger.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's why I said this movie deals with some heavy stuff, because like this creature is like calling him like a coward. It's like judging him for. But
my problem is that he's like 10 feet tall and doesn't look human. Like if it had
unbothered by it,
if it had looked like Albert Finney, and had been saying weird things and chasing it and putting himself together and chasing him, then I sort of would have, or if it had looked like his brother, for fuck's sake, that was chasing after him. But instead, he looks like this weird alien thing.
I think if they had made it look like his brother, this would have gotten an R rating.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Like
that's
that,
like
that.
Too far.
that if like that would have been too gruesome for what they were going for.
Yeah, you're right. It's a super good point.
But secondly, like I don't know, man, like the little touch of whimsy is what gives it that Halloween vibe that I like.
Interesting.
Like
I'm with you.
I'm into this creature. Like I think he's cool. Like and I'm not a big CG fan, but like the whole business of him coming together and falling apart, and the way his teeth don't exactly fit into his mouth, you know. Like,
well, and they added the piece that always triggers me, which is that they are in a jail cell, so they're trapped. Which that for me always just gets me. They're trapped, and Gil Bellows is like, "Oh, this is so silly. You guys are so silly." And then suddenly it's like, "Oh wait, what is this?" And they're like, "What is their new story? What the hell?" And then he completely stops, like communicating with them and doesn't let them out when the creature when the head rolls through the dog door or whatever it is.
Right.
And like they're just freaking out and they're trapped in the thing, and it turns out that Ramon is the target, but the sheriff gets it first.
And that sheriff, by the way, is not coming back because he just gets his
Right.
no matter what happens in part 2, like he just gets his neck snapped good and
yeah, because he wasn't the story. The story wasn't about him. It was about Ramon.
But
you're exactly right.
what I like that's going on here, though, more than just like the creature stuff and the suspense stuff of them being in the jail cell, is that they're dealing with this element of like shame of like him feeling like he's a coward, but also him talking about how his brother just got shipped, his body just got shipped back, and how they're
in
just
pieces.
sending people over there. Like this is heavy stuff. My only real problem with any of this is I think he should have kept being on the run at the end of it. Like I hate the fact that he decides to go to Nam.
Yeah.
After that, like I think that's kind of sending a mixed message, because they're sort of like trying to say, hey, running is also kind of a brave thing, at least I feel like that's what the message is they're trying to convey,
or that a moral thing. It's that running can be a moral thing, and I think that definitely, they're definitely making that case that it's not immoral for him to run from a war that he believes to be immoral. Look, I'm not saying if that's right or wrong, but that is definitely an attitude, and they're suggesting that he's not a bad person for making that choice. A lot of people went to Canada. He's not alone.
I just think it's strange that they
bone spurs.
Right.
I just think it's strange that they reverse course on that, and maybe that was them trying to have their cake and
boy, that's a good point.
I don't know.
Yeah, because by the end he's like, yeah, I guess I will go to Vietnam.
I don't like it though. I feel like it feels again like the two bits at the end are really the only parts I don't like about this movie, because I feel like that they kind of reverse course on stuff.
Well, the thing is,
I like about it earlier.
By the end of the movie, because this is not really an anthology film, it's actually a free the ghost story. They got to free the ghost. So the final the climax is all about this. Basically it's down to the wire as Ramon is being chased by the gangly man at the same time that Stella is trying to crack the code and free the ghost.
Yeah, and then it's the haunted house is the name of the story.
Is it? Okay. Well, very good.
Right. Yeah.
So that's
which ends up being, like almost the very real world Scooby Doo of the corporation was poisoning everybody.
Yeah.
And it's rich people ruining everything. But
I love that the solution,
everything with mercury.
The solution is in part, we will tell your story about what was really going on, but also in part telling her, dude, you've now become the monster that they were accusing you of being, and you need to quit it right now.
Yeah. So and you can either get into that or not. I agree with you, Drew. It's at that point you feel much more like you're in kind of a horror adventure story than a horror story, and I totally get it.
Well, it's not even like I don't even have a problem about that. I just want consistency, and I find that I love most of this movie, and I'm disappointed with the choice. Like either he's a coward for running, and his journey is that he's learning that he could be a soldier, or he's learning that he is okay with his choices and he's going to continue the run. I don't like that they try to do both. I think you have to take a stance, one or the other. I'm not trying to put a moral value on either of those things. I just think that narratively that's a little muddled.
I think the moral of the story is that you have to face your fears.
Sure, but to me, him facing his fears, acknowledging that he's not a coward for taking a stand, and that.
But he didn't take a stand. He did not say, "I don't believe in this war." He said, "My brother went over there. They shipped him back in pieces, and I just couldn't go." So it's definitely I freaked out about the idea that I'm going to go over there and get killed. It was not, I'm conscientious objector. That's not. We don't get that message. So I really feel like it's okay. I just need to face my fear and just go anyway.
Yeah.
You know,
You're right. because if-
I feel you. It just doesn't click.
You're right
for
that
me.
it's muddled because they handle it in like a that's just what's happening at the end. They're dropping.
It feels
him off
very
ship off
like
to
the rest
Vietnam.
of this movie's got like a pretty clear, way that it's going, and I feel like the last 10 minutes feel like something from a Hallmark movie. And I just don't like the fact that they give you a possibility that these kids are still alive. That really bothers me. Like it takes away from, it suddenly becomes an X-Men comic.
Sure.
like death has no meaning. And
Yes.
I'm not saying that can't, resurrection can work, and it can even work in horror. But for me, this here did not work.
No, I'm with you.
But again, I love the rest of the movie. Yeah, so and I guess it's to show that the ending of a movie, because I've now seen this movie 3 times, so I guess it just goes to show you the ending of a movie. And honestly, the stuff I didn't like were easier to take this time because I knew that they were coming.
If you wanted to honor his, go ahead, Tony. Yeah.
Also, though, I mean, you're right in the fact it becomes, more like, I guess, Stranger Things, like Julie was saying, or more like Phantasm, let's say Phantasm 3, where you're taking something and expanding it. Oh, look, because it becomes her realization that there's a supernatural for real, and that she can affect that supernatural. So I get where you're coming from, but it didn't bother me as much because it becomes more of just this origin story of somebody who is exposed to the supernatural in the same way that you would get the pilot episode of Friday the 13th, the series.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. But I get where you're coming from, but for me, thinking of it, that's how I thought of it, and it didn't bother me as much. But I do agree with you. The hey, I'm going to go to Nam part was muddled at best. So I am in complete agreement with you there, because it just doesn't, I don't know, it didn't work as much for me either, for the exact same reasons that you're talking about.
If you wanted to honor his conscientious objectorness, they could have actually just said, they could have dropped him off at a place where he was actually shipping out to be a medic, or to take one of the assignments that conscientious objectors would take. So you didn't
but again,
have to
I never
actually
got that he
have
was
him.
a conscientious objector. I just didn't get that.
I mean, it's really not.
Is it by running he's a conscientious objector by default?
No,
well, no, not necessarily, because he could just be scared.
Yeah, he literally said that the reason he didn't go is because his brother came back in pieces. That was all.
Yeah, because he could really believe, oh yeah, no, war is a necessary thing. It's just not going to be me.
Freak out. I mean, hell, I would freak out for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm glad that I was lucky enough not to have lived in a time of the draft. I've never had to face any of these questions. So I definitely don't have.
And it's complicated. I think that's the hard part, is you have something that is real world and is complicated for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And then you only get the horror part and the plot device part. But once it comes to the end, you just kind of sweep it, like Drew said, it just is kind of muddled, or it's kind of swept. Okay, well, this is just going to happen for a thing that's still to this day extremely complicated and affected, millions of lives and families, and the nature of war, how you deal with it, especially, I mean, Vietnam was that awakening. So to just kind of, hey, it's at the end, here goes the thing, is tough. And I'm in this too, because I've been watching Lovecraft Country, which has a part about Korea, and then the second season of Fargo, you have people who have been in the war, and they talk about that some, and that's handled kind of realistically. There's some really interesting lines and character bits about that. So taking something that is as complicated and just kind of doing what we do with it, I think that's where it just doesn't ring as true. But it's also not a movie about that, right? So what do you do with that? I don't really blame them per se, but it's not dealing with it in that much of a meaningful way. It does detract a little bit, but I don't think it's handled terribly. It's not like, that's just now makes it, just ruins it. But I would echo what Drew said, basically.
They wrap the whole thing up very quickly. He goes off. They see, I mean, basically, in a sense, they're just giving you an ending that sort of ties up every loose end.
Well, it also gives, her a chance. Not only is she going to write, she's writing for the paper, but her whole push, Stella's whole push as a writer becomes her through line of, hey, I'll write you a letter all the time.
Yeah.
And so them connecting in that way, it's a good way to keep them connected in a way that's not, hey, tell me where you're at each town you go to, and I'll send you a letter there, right?
Yeah.
So it is a choice in that way that really pushes and solidifies who she's going to be as a writer.
Yeah. I hope he makes it out okay. I just, it's horrible. It's just fucking horrible.
Well, if they're really making a sequel, maybe they'll follow up on that.
Yeah, I think so. I remember distinctly the end of the Vietnam War, and it's just, and I think we've talked often as we go through this show that everything in the 80s, the stuff that I was really paying attention to as a teenager, shows in the 80s are haunted by the Vietnam. Everything is it's always in the background. Miami Vice even, is just haunted by the fact that Sonny was in Vietnam. It was just so much a part of our culture. Anyway,
I mean, enough that there was a Marvel comic series,
the Nam. Yeah, that's right.
Those stories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't even know who wrote for that thing, but yeah, it was supposed to be pretty good. I gotta go buy a bunch of. I wonder if the Nam is collected in like a phone book or something, because that would be really good to read.
I don't know. I mean, but again, you don't have the Punisher without that as well.
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And they've had to take all these characters whose backstory is trauma in Vietnam and like punch it forward to be trauma in other, various police actions and operations, and of course the Iraq War. And trauma is trauma, right? Violence is violence, and armies clashing the night and limbs blown off. All of that stuff is trauma. Having said that, Vietnam hung like a pall over the whole nation in a way that nothing has since, and it's different. There is a different kind of psychic trauma associated with the backstory of the Punisher as originally, or the backstory of freaking Tony Stark, whose job is to build the bombs and and the guns and all that stuff. And Stan Lee actually saying, it'd be kind of fun to make a part of the, to make our hero this, what's the word I'm looking for? War profiteer is the word that I'm looking for. A literal daddy Warbucks becomes our leading hero in the Marvel comics. Anyway, okay. And that brings us to the end. We should get our final thoughts and then endorsements. So it was Julia, Tony, Drew, and Jason. Julia, have we treated this film adequately? And what are your final thoughts?
I actually don't feel like we talked enough about the family in the house and all the creepiness of her hiding from the family, because the young girl, I just blanked on her name. What's her name?
Sarah.
No, not Sarah. The modern day.
Oh yeah, we didn't touch at all on the lady who was accused of.
No, but what is Sarah? What is the girl's name in the modern day? The girl. She's
Stella.
Called Stella. Thank you. Yeah. So Stella gets basically transported into the past in the haunted house and sort of possessed by the ghost. And so we actually get to see her be, grabbed up by the brothers because she's gotten out, and this creepy blind grandmother. And there's all, it's like just really terrifying. And so then she gets thrown into the room, and now she's in the room with Sarah. And that's when she tells Sarah, you've turned into the monster, all that stuff. But anyway, that whole thing is really creepy too, because you really do have a lot of empathy for poor Sarah and all the things she went through.
Yeah.
Not to say that she should be randomly murdering these kids, but still, you do feel really bad for her. So I thought that was really well done and very scary. And we'd already seen just a glimpse of the house when they were in the house the first time, because one of the kids actually sees the grandmother in the room. But anyway, so that was all very also another really great spooky effect. And then for whatever reason, Sarah and her dad pick up the Ruth from the hospital. I don't know why. Like, what happened to Ruth's parents? I'm curious about where her parents are. But anyway, so they're like all happily in the car. At the end.
It doesn't matter. For some reason, they've picked her up. She's just part of the scene, so
exactly.
that so that we're able to,
Yeah. Well, we
complete
could
the
have just
circle on her
had
story.
a scene of her parents, bringing her home. Anyway, whatever. But that was weird. But okay. So like I said, so basically I think this movie's about half great and about like maybe more than half great, like 3/5 great and then 1/5 stupid and 1/5 gross. So that's kind of how I feel. But yeah, I think it's enjoyable. And I do hope that they make a sequel and that that Chuck and Augie make it out alive.
Thank you very much. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like I said, I like the movie. I think it's got a lot of great bits. Maybe not perfect, but again, that can be said for a lot of really good films. So, I like a lot of the choices that were made, and I still think that it works. If you're going to say, hey, we're not going to do a traditional anthology film, the framing story and how they pull people through that and keep that intensity was actually a really good idea. And I'm happy. And again, I was, when I was watching it, I was kind of sad again that I didn't get to see it in the theater, because it's definitely one of those things that I kept trying to go and just didn't get to at the time. And some cool looking creatures. I think that they work really well. Great cast. Yeah, I enjoy the movie. I'm glad that we're covering it and that everybody get together and see it. It's definitely an awesome Halloween movie. I think I might, and to be honest with you, I might like it better than some of the other anthology movies that people might be watching around this time. So I'm glad that we had the idea to do this one. It's a really good one.
It was actually Drew's idea that we do this one. And Drew, what are your thoughts? Have we gone the places that you were hoping that we would go?
The one thing I think I would have liked to have talked about that we didn't touch on much is I really like, even though it's not as developed as it could be, I really like Stella's relationship with her dad and about how he's.
No, I was thinking that too. I agree with you absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a really
and
great.
They got a really good actor to play him,
Hank from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, but it kind of fills in the blanks of this idea that her mom's gone and she kind of blames herself that she left, even though it's not, and the dad's kind of overprotective, and I like all that stuff. It grounds it in a reality. Even though there's all this fantastical stuff, and it also continues that tone of not talking down to the kids have emotional stakes and things like that, and I really like that about this. I really like this movie. I think this is a good addition to the canon of Halloween themed horror films, and I can see this being one that people go back to every October, because it really, even though only the opening part really takes place on Halloween, but the whole thing has this, just again, I keep saying this, the strong Halloween energy to it that I really gives me like the flavor I'm craving right around this time of year. And I like it. I'm glad that we talked about it. I think it's again a worthy addition to all the different Halloween themed horror films that exist.
And I agree with Drew actually, as far as their relation, Stella and her dad's relationship, because they also, and it happens in a very, it could easily be in a Stephen King adaptation as well. And because at first he seems very, oh, that's my dad. He works 2 jobs, but he's really trying. And then once they need to pull it through, his concern and the way that he's been through a lot. They've both been through a lot. They're bad at communicating that to each other, but his genuine concern and belief in her, is really great. And, those moments are actually done really, really well. It could go a myriad of different ways, and I like where they took it.
That's really well said.
I agree with Drew that we didn't go over that enough, but it does become a really nice touch, and is harrowing because you see his concern whenever he's genuinely cares for his daughter, genuinely cares for her well-being in a world where he's got to do everything he can to he's just dog tired trying to deal with life and protecting her, which he does. He knows that he's not doing as good of a job because he's got to work all the time. But also that work is to keep him from having to deal with the reality of his wife leaving.
Yeah.
So
His
it
loneliness.
feels
Yeah.
real and poignant as a touchstone, and a difference between all the stuff that is surreal and nightmarish. It's its own real world nightmare, to be honest.
It is funny that we didn't touch on it, and because God knows, I mean, this is a very densely packed movie. What's great about that whole thing with that relationship between the dad and Stella is that, like a lot of good choices in this film, it runs counter to what you would think you're going to see. Where, because like I say, the movie often has a sort of sun-dappled, as we said, a Stephen King look, but it's willing to address what stuff that was actually going on in 68 and the anxieties that real people really had, and racists and but it constantly is surprising you. The sheriff is actually not that bad a guy. The dad is really not that bad a guy. So there's a lot of not one way I like to think of it. I was listening to this lecture recently. Julie and I were watching a masterclass on screenwriting, and Shonda Rhimes was talking about how if you've seen it before, don't bother doing it. In other words, if you've already done the story where the dad is a racist drunk who's abusive or whatever, if you've seen that before, just don't do it. Not that that's a bad thing to do or whatever, but it's tiresome. And so to go in another direction, to go in more the direction of Harry Dean Stanton in what was that, Pretty in Pink?
Yeah.
That's where we're going with this one, and it's nice because we haven't seen that in a while, so that's a good one. Cool stuff. I actually really enjoyed this. My final thought. I really enjoyed this film, but it's not to my taste the way that it would be just to pop in Tales from the Crypt or an old anthology. So I would have been perfectly happy for it to have been a straight anthology.
Would you feel that way if this was not based off of a prior IP?
No, I would not. If they had just said, if they had just called it, The Haunting of Sarah, I would probably not given it another thought. That's so. You're absolutely right. Isn't that crazy? Which is exactly
not
what
crazy
happened with
at all.
Dark
Just
Shadows.
means you had expectations when you heard the title "Scary Stories." Stories tell in the dark. Right. I cannot talk right. I am exhausted.
No. But yeah, and I think it's worth a conversation all on its own. Why is it that we, it's difficult, any kind of art, that the audience plays a part in it. And so if the audience hasn't been primed properly, the art itself can not find its mark, and that's a troubling thing and a difficult thing to maneuver your way around, because you, the artist, don't always have control over how, what's going to happen, like on the day of that the audience goes to watch it, or what they walk in thinking about. Julie, you're going to say something?
No, sorry.
No big deal. All right, but in this case, they were choices that they made. So it's an interesting question. All right. Let's do the endorsements. I can't wait to hear. I know exactly what Julia and I have spent the week watching, so there's almost nothing else that has had time to make its way into our brain. But I'd love to hear what y'all are up to. So, Julia, you're first. What are you up to?
Right. So, okay. So we talked about The Haunting of Bly Manor last time. This week,
I'm just laughing because it's so sad. There's very little time that we have, and what little time we do have has apparently been spent watching one show. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to start with another show first, because I don't forget to say it. So I had talked in the past about being obsessed with The Vow, which was a documentary about the story of the NXIVM cult. Well, now there's another documentary, even better, with even more juicy details about this horrible cult, NXIVM cult, called Seduced, Inside the NXIVM Cult. And it's, I think, on Stars. But anyway, it's dropping an episode a week, and it's really good. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's on
these
Stars.
People are,
yeah.
It's like really horrible how these people treated the cult members. But Jason, what is it, the other thing that we've been watching all week?
That'd be Mr. Mercedes. Absolutely.
So Mr. Mercedes is so good. I am like, He wanted to space it out a little bit because there's 2 seasons available. I was like, no, I want to watch all of it. So the fact that I'm not watching an episode right now is just, a testament to how much I love you guys. Because otherwise I'd be like, no, I'm going to keep watching Mr. Mercedes. It's such a good show. Oh my gosh. I'm really enjoying it. It's very interesting. Brendan Gleeson is great, and there's a lot of other just wonderful actors.
Based on the Stephen King novel.
Yeah, quite a few people in this film where I'm like, wait, who is that? And then I look them up. I'm like, oh, right. But no, it's just, it's suspenseful. And the main actor, whose name is escaping me now, the bad guy. What is it? Do you know his name?
No, but I can find it for you.
Let's see. Yeah, I'll find it too. But anyway, he's great. I think he's kind of the new Heath Ledger, really. As far as like the Joker, Heath Ledger. Let's see. Did you figure out?
His name is Harry Treadaway, and he is
right.
British.
Yes. Anyway, great actor. So yes, I highly recommend it.
He played Victor Frankenstein on Penny Dreadful.
Sweet.
And so
that's mine.
Wonderful. By the way, that show is on Peacock if you're looking for it. It came out like in 2017 on Audience, and Stephen King has been pretending that it's an all new premiere because it essentially is, because nobody knew where the hell to find Audience. And so it moved to Peacock. And so at least some people can find their way to Peacock. And there it is. Tony, what about you? What do you have to endorse for us?
I guess things I've been watching, I've just been like blazing through everything in Fargo on Hulu. So I'm actually caught up to episodes they release weekly. But I think my endorsement would actually be the book I kept mentioning a couple of times. If you can find a copy of Haunted Planet, or to go back through any of the less famous than Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Scholastic and a bunch of companies would have these short story anthologies that you could buy through book clubs, and eventually you'd see them at used bookstores. So the Haunted Planet had some things that had a lot of dread. I think they're still definitely aimed at younger audiences when I remember it, but still, it's just dour.
That's fabulous. Thank you for that tip, because I think that's a wonderful tip.
It's got a great cover, this like skeleton Dracula looking thing on the cover. I like I said, I found it again recently in a bunch of paperbacks. So I would say, go to your used bookstores and kind of look through that. Oh, on that same note though, it's just popped into my head. I noticed Grady Hendrix had posted he's having a Kindle sale. So, so he's discounted a bunch of books on Kindle. I'll have to dig up that link to post it as well. But Grady's great, and he's a really good author and a really cool person, fun person to talk to, and has a real love for horror. Of course, he's introduced, going through like seeing him at a show, and then also being friends online. He goes over a lot of Asian horror stuff as well. So a lot of Hong Kong Category 3 stuff that I've been exposed to through him, as well as just being a really awesome author with some really cool stuff. His Paperbacks from Hell is great. But yeah, he's having a Kindle sale, so you can pick up some cool books to read, and like I said, go find some I recommend digging deep and seeing what other kind of just weird, off the wall, hidden gems that you can find online. I mean, I guess it's more dangerous to go to a half price bookstore. I would say, hey, go, thumb through the shelves of the half price books for that. If you can do it online, I definitely recommend doing that. But I'll have to post the Haunted Planet.
It's a great idea.
Book as well, but yeah, it's I don't know, your mileage may vary on that, but that's the one that stuck with me, and it's it wasn't widely sold as far as I know. So
wow,
looks
what a
like
great
you
tip.
can get one for anywhere between $20 and $4. I don't know.
I often find with a lot of that like vintage stuff, if you don't care about quality, you can find stuff for essentially the cost of shipping. Like if it's a paperback that came out in 1972 and you don't give a shit if it looks absolutely beat to hell, then you can probably find one for $2 plus whatever it cost them to ship, which always leads me to wonder, like, is that these guys' business? Is they're just selling books essentially just for a $2 margin? And I don't know, but I've bought a lot of like beat up library copies of all kinds of stuff for essentially nothing
Sure.
but postage.
Well, this one I keep seeing for like on Amazon and eBay. There's like the $4 one, but I keep seeing it for like $19.99, which is
Right.
a really thin book. So I guess you're paying for vintage.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's
I'm
96
surprised
pages.
that it's going for $20.
That must be a nice
considering
one.
It was.
Because yeah.
I don't know. I mean, mine's definitely. The pages are fairly yellow. They were. These books were not meant to be archival. Let's put it that way.
Great. But that's the best.
So-
Those are the ones that smell good and they look lived in, and you touch them and you get it, and you're transported to a prior world. Maybe that's just me.
or possibly into a haunted world if you don't watch out. Evidently for this movie. So.
Drew, what do you have to endorse for us?
Well, first off, Wednesday, the last Halloween Man comic of our 20th anniversary October comes out, which is, as I said last week when we did The Mummy as a movie, it's called Halloween Man versus the Mummy. And if that sounds like your idea of a good time, and if you're listening to this podcast, it probably is, I highly recommend you going over the Comixology and checking it out. Aside from that, on Friday, 8 o'clock Central, October 30th, we are having a mega chat up with myself and a bunch of other Halloween Man related creators, including Nicholas Scott, all the way from Australia, online. I'm going to post the link about that. Jason here is actually going to be gracious enough to be our host that evening. Pop by and say hello. Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
And then what are we doing on Halloween?
What am I doing on Halloween?
No, what are we doing? Castle of Horror.
Oh,
do you remember
I don't know if you guys have internalized this. Julia, would you like to tell us?
I have not had the bandwidth to internalize it. I apologize.
No. Just our Twitter. I don't even know what it's called. What is it? Like a movie marathon?
The Mutant Family live tweet 24-hour marathon. We are doing the Vampire Lovers. That's going to be on Twitter. We're all going to be taking a part on that. It's going to be, and we're going to be followed up by our good friends in the Monster Movie Happy Hour.
That's right.
Ugh.
That's right.
But
it's like a blast.
On an actual endorsement, Jason, you will like this. I am going to suggest the Mortuary Collection, which is a traditional anthology.
Oh yeah.
And this is a Shudder movie, and it stars the great Clancy Brown as a character named Mortimer Dark, who is a creepy old mortician in this Bayside town who is doing in the course of doing a job interview with somebody that wants to come work in his mortuary, tells various stories over how people died. And it is gruesome. It is funny. It's also got strong Halloween energy to it. And it actually kept me guessing with a few things too. So I thought this is a really clever movie. And of the original films that I have watched over the course of this month, I think this is the one that I've probably enjoyed the most thus far, especially because I just love Clancy Brown in this. And yeah, Jason, this is probably the movie that you would have wanted from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, because it is very much in the vein of Amicus or any one of those old school, or Creep Show for that matter. Any one of those old school anthologies, although it's enough of its own thing. It's not of a rehash, and it's
Thank you for that tip.
Yeah, it's very
I don't think I've ever
stylish.
seen it, Drew, and I can't believe I haven't seen it, because I've been hearing about that my whole life, and I can't believe I haven't seen it. But on your say so, I am going to watch it. Hell yeah!
Well, it is worth getting Shudder just to watch it. Sorry, Tony.
I'm glad that you brought it up as well, because it was a Fantastic Fest movie that I just wasn't able to schedule in with the other things I wanted to watch and cover, and I had lost track because that's my brain lately. So I'm glad you brought it back up, because lots of people dug it and I need to check it out. So I appreciate
so
that,
much
Drew,
fun.
Yeah,
you won't regret it. It is so much fun. Like Jamie and I both watched it. It was actually Jamie's idea to watch it. I can't take total credit. Like she was like, "Oh, I watched the trailer for this. This seems like perfect Halloween time viewing," and we both watched it and we were like, that was perfect Halloween time viewing. So I I think everybody on the podcast would probably enjoy different parts of it.
Now, my understanding
Yeah,
correctly,
well, I mean,
you're
again,
talking
it's
about,
the Fantastic Fest thing, so I
It's
still
the
am
same
kind of
movie.
bummed that I didn't get to see it there, you know?
What were you
So,
saying, Jason?
you called
Sorry?
it the Mortuary Collection.
The
And
Mortuary Collection.
why is it called that?
Because
So
it
this
takes
is
place
not,
in a mortuary.
so this is not 1983, The Mortuary.
No.
Or Mortuary.
This is a 2019 film.
Oh my gosh. All right. Okay. All right. No, I'm intrigued. I'm also intrigued by the 1983 Mortuary. I've been hearing about that since I was a kid. But you're talking about something all new.
I'm
Okay.
starting about something that this is the movie that you wanted this movie to
Okay.
be.
I'm down. I'm sold. That sounds fabulous. So we definitely got to make that happen for Halloween for sure. Oh wait, and that leaves me. Well, I have nothing. I've been watching Mr. Mercedes with Miss Joya and working on the Castle of Horror podcast book, which is coming in December. So I'm getting all those transcripts ready.
Well, then I
But,
have one for you.
yeah,
Which
please.
is we're not going to probably have another episode before Election Day. So everybody please vote if you haven't already. Vote
Yep.
early. And, that's what my other one is.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really wonderful.
Unless you're going to vote for Trump, then stay home.
Right? Halloween is here, and just like in this movie, it's Halloween time and also an election. And by the time we are back together, we will all have the hangover from the election. So all right, everybody be safe out there. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys. On the Facebook page, let us know what you think. We will totally engage. It's been a really fun season, and I will be back very soon with Mad Love and then some new series, including a series that we're calling, I think I called it Dead Writers Writing, but it's basically going to be horror movies about writers, including an experiment of one movie that got remade once in the 60s and once in the 70s with totally different casts. And Barbara Steele will be making an appearance. So yay. All right, everybody, have a fantastic evening, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Night, happy Halloween.
Happy
Nice.
Halloween.
Good night.